when you're always affirming narratives that don't belong to you, it's very hard to believe that your story is important or you are important as an individual. So that goes back to the whole notion of representation, that you start doubting, am I worth love because I'm not seeing more of myself out there? I'm not seeing my story being told. Is my experience, a well-lived experience? I mean, it even goes down to seeing how our parents have kind of molded themselves in society.
Afshin everyone, and welcome to the Economites, where we have candid conversations on critical issues. My name is Nico Mgiba, and today I'm very excited to bring you this episode with my guest, Karen Mwendera. Karen is an award-winning multimedia journalist, a lecturer, and a former ENCA producer of a show called Backchat. Karen and I today will be speaking about young people and African excellence. Do enjoy. Karen, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
No, I'm all right. I just want to thank you for availing yourself and spending some time with us here in the Economites.
No problem. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me to this.
Fantastic. So how I normally do this is that I normally have a set format. Normally in my head, it's never written down on how I'm going to take this thing on. The line of questioning, which I'm going to bring forward to my guest. It's normally strict. It's normally structured. It's normally like a certain way. But with your experience and the way that you grew up and the kind of stuff that you have done throughout your life, it's pretty unique. You have a unique experience. And as a result, my format can't be the same. It had to be unique.
I love that. I love that idea.
Exactly. So what I normally do, in fact, in this thing is that I'll start off with the actual thing, the topic that we're going to speak about. Then I'll go into a story. But for you, the topic that we want to speak about is actually influenced by your story. And as a result, I'd like to actually begin by your story. You were born in Malawi. You went to school and you were raised or grew up in Kenya and Swaziland, which is now called Eswatini, as you know. And currently you apply your skills deep in the heart of Johannesburg. Can you just take us into that journey, your childhood in Malawi when you were born? How was that like?
Yeah. So unfortunately, I never had the privilege of growing up in Malawi. Immediately after I was born, my dad got a job lecturing in Ethiopia. So we moved literally after a few months of my birth. And from, the infant stages, I was in Ethiopia. And then when I turned 3, that's when my dad also changed his job and he got a contract with the University of Swaziland. So, academia took us that side. And that's literally where my whole life was growing up. So my primary school, my preschool, my part of my high school was in Swaziland, and it was an amazing experience. I think in the fact that Swaziland is such a small country, so you kind of get to know everyone. You go to the mall, there's always a chance you'll see someone you know. So that was nice. It was home for me. Like Swaziland still has an amazing place in my heart. And after that, we moved to South Africa. So my dad's contract ended and we had to come. He got a different job this side, but it was also quite a short contract. And during that phase, he really tried hard in order to find, employment. To take care of the family. And that then led us moving to Kenya for 2 years. And that was also quite an amazing experience. The time we moved to SA, I was like, okay, this is it. No more moving. I just started making new friends, and it's high school, so it's really difficult to make friends in high school. So when they told us, my dad told me that, hey, actually, you have to move. We're moving, and I was pissed. I was literally upset, and I remember crying on the plane going to Kenya. Wow. Because also the stereotypes that existed back then, especially when you're a child. I remember kids would ask me, oh, is there internet in Kenya? Like weird things like that. Yeah. And I'm just like, that is so stereotypical. But when I got there, my whole outlook changed, my perception on life changed, and I met some of the most amazing people in my life actually are from that place. and learning about the culture, the different people. That was beautiful. And then, yeah, after 2 years of high school, I finished for high school there, then we came back to South Africa and have been here since. That was
2012.
2012.
So you mentioned
Yeah,
something pretty important. You said that your experiences and your outlook changed. Can you speak to
yeah.
like a little bit about that? That whole experience of moving around the continent. How has that
Mm.
shaped the way that you think, the way that you interpret different situations that you may face, and also I think
Yeah.
generally view Africa?
Mm.
Mm,
I think one thing I've learned, particularly from meeting the different people in from different African contexts, is that we are all connected in one way or another. Like Africa is vast and beautiful in terms of so many different perspectives and different cultures and different traditions. But at the end of it, the essence of being African is the same because you go to one country, you still experience that African flavor and the way they welcome you. I mean, when we got to Kenya, we arrived there and people found out that, oh, you're actually not from Kenya. They really welcomed us with open arms and were keen to know more about like the Malawian culture, or you'll hear people like, oh, I want to go there. That's a place I wanted to go to.
yeah.
So it also gives you a little bit of appreciation of where you come from once you hear it from the way other people think about it. And I think in terms of just learning more about the growth of, the way Africa has kind of boomed itself and looking at the diversity that young people have in terms of, finding employment, entrepreneurship, we're literally shaping our own narrative. And I think
Yeah.
that has been so beautiful to see. And that experience has also kind of culminated where I am today in terms of the kind of journalism that I focus on is on positive African stories because there's just so many of them out there.
No, I understand. Well put. Just dig in a little bit deeper on that. You said
Mhm.
that you were kind of forced because your parents got employment in different place, and you had to move as a result. Now,
Yeah.
it must have sucked, as you said, when you were young. But when you look back at it now, do you say that, I actually enjoyed that, I actually learned from
Yeah.
that, and that's actually a good idea?
Yeah, no, honestly, it's been such a blessing. I mean, it is a
Mm,
privilege. Not a lot of people can say that they've had the ability or the luxury to live in different African cultures or different countries.
yeah,
So I am very thankful for that experience, although it was a very tough time for our family because, when the breadwinner of the house is not able to get a job, it can be quite frustrating. So
yeah.
you do have to understand the certain, positions that your parents or your guardians have to go through to be able to make sure there's bread on the table. So that was, I mean, now that I look back, I'm very thankful for that. And also that exposure, because it's really opened my mind to, seeing the world differently, wanting
Mm.
to know more, that hunger to learn more about different African cultures and different African people, just appreciate Africans altogether. I think, yeah, I'm definitely thankful for that experience more than anything.
No, fantastic. In your answer, you mentioned something about narratives, and I think I'd like us to just get into that a little bit more. You describe yourself as a storyteller through texts and other medias. And
Mm-hmm.
in fact, not even 20 years ago, not even 25 years ago, Africa
Mm-hmm.
was labeled as the dark continent, no hope,
Mm-hmm.
no future. And then that sort of transited, sorry, it kind of like changed. It kind of like changed to that being Africa being the next frontier. Kind of like the
Mm.
emerging market was synonymous to Africa. And then that sort of died down in the midst of the 2007, 2008, 2009 global financial crisis.
Mm.
But then, like, what we see there is that it's other people, non-Africans, that are driving that narrative. Uh, Non-Africans telling Africans who they are. Now, as a
Mm-hmm.
storyteller, how important is it for Africans to get a handle on their own narrative and drive it?
Mm-hmm. Gosh, that's such an important question,
Mm,
Nico.
mm,
It is absolutely important for Africans to drive our own narrative.
yeah.
I mean, when we look back at the historical context of colonialism, media was owned by the colonialists. So they had a handle on, the newspapers. They were writing out the articles. They were talking about who owns the trade and who's trading what in order for them to know, which African countries there's gold or where they, can go and, expose themselves to new resources. So as a result, Africans never had the ability to tell their own story, even during the time media first arrived here. It was only owned by them. And it kind of gives you this imposter complex that you don't
Mm,
belong in your own land And it's also given, they say that around the way the media shapes narratives, it allows for power. So once you don't have the ability to tell your own story, you've already lost out on having your own story told, and you've lost out on having that power, because media does that. I mean, we have notions called media imperialism, where most of the media that we're experiencing now is coming from the West, and the reverse is not the same. They don't get to experience African cultures or African music or African films the way we experience American films, American narratives. I mean, you walk in the street, you hear people, use words like yo, yo, my nigga, but you'll never hear someone in the States going, eta,
Yeah.
social grand, those little things. But beyond that, it's also about representation, the ability for me to see someone else that I can relate to, or see a Disney film about an African woman or an African young princess, who's overcome certain things in her village. That is so important, because it also affirms that your experience is important, your experience is real, and it's not kind of a story that you just have to sweep under the rug. And that's what we've kind of done with a lot of experiences in the African culture, that we sweep it under the rug because we're not exposed to seeing that, oh, other people are going through that, or this is something I can adapt in my own context and see how I can overcome the challenges that I have. Even in things like, business, or, where the money is, the power to see someone or an African person achieving amazing things, not from corruption, not from, some sketchy ways, but they authentically got to where they are because of what they've done, and they're representing Africa as it is. It sheds that light from changing that narrative, like you said, about the dark continent, to Africa being a continent of light and of love and of amazing diversity. So it really is important in terms of power dynamics, in terms of who owns the power to tell your own story, and representation is so important for that to come out. And that's why more and more Africans really are fighting hard to have their own stories told the way that they want to.
Speaking on the more intangible side of things, still sticking to the actual narrative story, back at Wits you wrote a piece titled "A Letter to Your Future Daughter," which I read, which was inspiring. In fact, I almost shed a tear.
Oh, really? Thank you.
But drawing from that, there was something which you said which was quite inspiring and very, very inspirational. You said that you want your future daughter to understand the art of loving herself. Now, obviously, we're going to take that from the context of you talking to your future daughter to speaking to the continent. How important is it to getting a hold of our narrative and driving it is self-love? So Africans loving Africanism, loving being Africans. How important is that?
I mean, it affirms so much about, who we liken ourselves to. The people that we see on the media sometimes take on this role model position. So as a young person, or even as an older person, you see someone on the media, and subconsciously you affirm that person, because the media kind of gives that credibility to this person or this story. And when you're always affirming narratives that don't belong to you, it's very hard to believe that your story is important, or you are important as an individual. So that goes back to the whole notion of representation, that you start doubting, am I worth love? Because I'm not seeing more of myself out there. I'm not seeing my story being told. Is my experience, a well-lived experience? I mean, it even goes down to seeing how our parents have kind of molded themselves in society. Our parents are our first form of, what a role model is. But once you get out of that, socialization period, and then you start experiencing the media, and you start experiencing different people who are supposed to be role models, it's hard to say, oh, I can, follow up looking at, for example, Queen Elizabeth as a role model, but we don't have the same hair, we don't have the same skin color, we don't have the same lived experience. So now you kind of get lost as an individual as to, is my story important, or is my story real? Because I'm not experiencing what other people are experiencing out there. And that's why it's very important for us to learn how to love ourselves, and the media plays a huge role in that, because it gives that affirmation that your story is important as Nico, and where you come from, your background is important. It does not have to be molded like an American love story or an American setting altogether, but your African narrative is essential.
Mm-hmm. Now, switching gears a little bit, let's speak about young people. Now, you are in a very good position because you're a lecturer, so you interact with young people. You deal with young people on a daily basis. And
Yes.
not only do you mark the scripts, very terrible, but then you also speak to them. You also interact with them and chat with them. Now, we hear that young people, it can go two ways. If they manage very well, they can be a great asset. Okay, it can be a great resource. But like if mismanaged, can be a great threat to the future. Where do you fall in what I've just said? Are you optimistic about young people? Are you pessimistic about young people? How do you view young people and the future of the continent?
That's a very good question. I think just to start off there, I still do get confused as a student at school. So it's quite a funny experience, but I do enjoy it, and I love working with young people. Looking at the way we are and the narrative, I am very hopeful. I'm hopeful that young people are going to drive and change our continent and, change the way our society is. Africa is one of the youngest continents in the world. So we have the highest percentage of young people. But you find that in politics, they're not using that. In government positions, in business positions, they're not using that ability to see that we've got a skill that no other continent in the world has. Why are we not leveraging off that? Young people have the ability to see things differently, to bring in new ideas, change the narrative, and they're the future holders of power. So we need to start grooming them at a very young age, because they need to understand the power that they have and the power that they're capable of achieving. And the younger generation, especially in today's society, we play the role of, being breadwinners for ourselves, but also giving back to our families. I mean, black tax is a real thing. You start working, you start a job, your family, your relatives are always thinking about, how you can help them. So we kind of live this double-edged sword where, we're hustling, but at the same time, we're also trying to think about how best can I support my family. And that's why it's so important that we raise the bar in terms of allowing young people to be in more spaces, because they're taking up so much responsibility versus, periods of times where you had, children free to roam and do whatever they want. By the time you're born, you already know you've got funding set out for you. All you do is just live and choose a path. But now we're in this space where we're trying to choose a path, but we're also thinking about how best can I help my people? How best can I help my community? So that's why it's so important that we continue to encourage young people and show them that you are capable of doing so much more. And your dream is my dream. I mean, we have that African proverb that when you raise a child, that the whole village is helping in raising that. So we're all in this together, but we need to see more of that, especially when it comes to positions of power, of allowing those young voices to come out.
Now that makes so much sense. You see, I'm a history enthusiast, right? I study history as a part-time thing, my personal thing. And I was looking at the economic history of the United States. What drives economic growth, a big component of good economic growth, is productivity and employment. And if you look at the history of the United States, a big chunk of that boost in productivity, which happened in the 1960s, 1970s, was the introduction of women, right? Women, different demographics, which have previously not been allowed, have been blocked to participate in the mainstream economy. So I think it goes beyond just young people. I think we must even dial it down. Like, okay, African women, African young women, there's just so much that they can offer, but then blocking them, you are actually blocking your own progress. Like you said, different thoughts, different ideas, more productivity, more energy. What are your thoughts on African women in particular?
No, I agree with you there. I think it's so essential that we also shift the narrative to women, because
Yeah.
women have been such a huge disadvantaged
Yeah.
a minority group in society. And in the African narrative, we also experience that traditionally, where women have to take on traditional roles at home, or traditional roles in terms of what a woman or lady or an African woman must look like or be like. And
Mm.
that kind of limits, the amount of work or the amount of possibilities that our society can progress at, because you'll find that, number one, we're still dealing with things like the gender pay gap, which is a real thing.
Mm.
And that already is showing that, a woman's worth is not equivalent to what a man can do.
Mm.
And it's so difficult to be in a place where you wanna do the best that you can as a woman. You wanna prove that you are as capable as your brother or your cousin,
Yeah.
or your uncle or auntie, that you basically grew up in the same household. But by the time you both turn 18, one of you guys is going to get a job and get a car and be able to, start their own family. Whereas the other is already, you're already starting to think, oh, who are you going to marry? Which part of life are you going to get? Are you going to have kids? All of that pressure is already put on women from a young age, and they're not told to dream big. They're not told to dream for what they want to achieve. It's always about, okay, once you're done, when are you going to have babies? I mean, you hear that all the time.
Yeah.
They're like, Mom, calm down, relax. So it's so important to bring in, empowering women, even women in the village. We've got really heartbreaking stories in different African contexts where genital mutilation is still happening, child marriages is still happening, women are getting killed, women are getting raped. Like, we are literally almost in a sense where we hate our women. We're not showing them love. We're not protecting them. These are people that these are people that raise us. When you think about your own mom, everyone has a mother, but why do we think that it's okay to hurt someone else who's also potentially going to be someone's mom or is someone's daughter? So, we're already taking away that choice, and that is already really, changing the narrative altogether. And I'm very happy that some politicians are now seeing the importance of adding more women in politics,
Yes.
and are seeing the kind of amazing work that they can do. More women in tech, more women in engineering, in so many diverse jobs. And, women are capable of doing the same thing that a man can do.
No, fantastic. Yeah, well said. Now, speaking about excellence, because one of the things that we were meant to speak about was African excellence. How do you
Yeah.
define what is excellent? I know you mentioned something about starting businesses properly, like not sketchy, no scams, none of that, but doing it the proper way within the given rules of the whatever game that you are talking about, but also doing well, right? So not just doing it properly, but doing very well. So doing fantastic things in a fantastic way. How would you
Yeah.
define excellence, number one? And in the African context, what does excellence look like?
Sure.
Mm.
I think when you think about excellence, well, for me, I'd say it's obviously someone with integrity,
Mm.
someone who's striving to, achieve amazing things, whatever context that it is. Obviously, it can be very subjective
Yeah.
as to what you define as excellence, but I think it's the ability to say or be in a position where you feel like you've achieved some sort of self-worth, and you
Yeah.
are able to give back to others. So it's not just about me as an individual, but how is what I've done with myself helping or impacting the people around me. And I think that's when we now are achieving excellence, because it's no good for one person to be excellent and all the success is only on them, and there's nothing to go around. How are you impacting the people around you? And that is so important. So having said that, my idea of an excellent African person is someone who has achieved great things in whatever industry that they work in,
Yeah.
but they also see the need to be able to impact those that are around them. And it's not just a me factor, but it's an us factor. It's that factor of Ubuntu, that Ubuntu excellence, that I am because you are. We grow better. I mean, there's that. I think it was Nelson Mandela who said this. That if you walk alone, you won't go far. But if we walk together, we can go further.
Mm.
And that essentially does work according to my understanding of what excellence is.
Mm. No, fantastic. That's actually a good segue to African unity. In the beginning, you also
Mm.
mentioned something about how Africans, we are connected. And I think you are in a very good position to actually say something like that because you've actually experienced it firsthand. What are your thoughts on African unity? I mean, we see it on the global stage sometimes where there are disagreements, fundamental disagreements amongst African countries, which is very disappointing.
Yeah.
And then we talk about African unity. What does that mean to you? Is that a myth? Some people think African unity is just rhetoric. Do you believe that it's something that can be achieved, or is it just words?
I would like to think that. I would like to think it's something that we could achieve, or something not even that we could, we should strive
Should.
for.
Yeah.
Should strive for. And I say
Mm,
that because we are at a space where, it's no secret that xenophobia is a thing. And,
mm,
we have tribalism in countries themselves. Like in Kenya, there have been stories around tribalism that I've
mm,
experienced and things that I've heard. In South Africa as well, you've got the Zulus, the Xhosas, and this
mm,
whole fight around, who's better, So I think it's so important that we strive to become, together, that togetherness, because I think that's when we'll be stronger as a nation, stronger as a continent. This notion of African unity, I think, is something that everyone can practice in
mm,
whatever space that they are, from little children to, adults. I remember growing up and, schooling in Swaziland, unfortunately, I had experienced, situations of xenophobia, but back then it wasn't, termed that. It was just about, oh, this girl's darker than us, and therefore she can't chill with us, she can't sit with us, or no, they had this term called a queer, yeah,
mm.
something like that.
Yes.
Yes. So, you're a child and you're hearing this and you're just like, okay, but I don't understand why
Mm,
we would hate someone
mm,
from coming from it just because they come from a different place, or just
mm.
because they look different than you, or they speak a different language.
Yeah.
And as a result, we start segregating people like that because
Mm,
we always want to be surrounded by like-minded people. But now, with the progression of society, we've seen how powerful it is to be around people that think different than you, people that see things differently, because that's how you grow and that's how we can have this togetherness. I mean, now we're going towards the African Continental Free Trade Agreement,
yeah.
and opening up those borders will be such a huge game changer, because it means better trade. It means business happening from one African country to another without having laws, without having problems or issues with visas, having any issues with
Yeah.
getting into different countries. But when it comes to looking at the global context, it's much easier for people from a European descent or American descent to come into an African country than it is for our own people to go into our own countries. And that for me does not make sense. It still perplexes me till
Mm.
today.
No, it does. It does for me as well. It really doesn't make sense. But switching
Mm.
gears even more, let us speak about your professional journey. You're currently at
Yeah.
Forbes, and before that, you did some time at ENCA Backchat, where I met you. Uh,
Yeah.
so, and you're a journalist, right? And you work with media, and you meet fantastic people. You went from covering Mr. and Mrs. South Point, writing about student relationships and student
Yes.
strippers, all the way to covering BRICS summits. Now,
God.
that's one hell of a journey. When you reflect on all of that, what goes through your mind?
A lot actually goes through my mind. I am
Mm,
grateful for the journey that I've been in and been exposed to, and also just in the professional context. Most journalists tend to side with, only being a writer, only being in front of camera. But I've had the opportunity to be on both sides of things, from, meeting you as a producer for a show,
mm,
to also anchoring part-time with a
mm.
different publication, and then, writing. So, learning the whole rounded skills of storytelling from different elements, that has been something quite amazing. And in terms of growth, I used to be such a shy person. Well, I still am in some different aspects, but
Yeah.
my job basically is like, no, no, girl, you can't be shy. So
Mm,
it's really taken me out of my shell and put me in deep ends. I mean, I always was afraid of covering political stories. That was not me. So covering things like BRICS, for example,
mm,
has or the South African Investment Forum. That was something also quite amazing to be part of. So I have grown, and I'm very thankful for the growth that I've had. And from meeting the different people all together, it's just amazing. And just picking up on what essentially makes a good story, or what makes a good interview, from conversations with different people and hearing their stories, it's been very inspiring as well.
I know I was speaking to my business partner, Dumazi, and we were discussing in one of our strategic meetings that what is our strength? I know we call ourselves the Economites, and the first thing that you would really think of is things of like numbers, graphs, the economy. But we saw that our strength is really the diverse guests that we have, because everybody can participate in the economy, but there's only been a focus on business leaders and people wearing suits. But many people, journalists and media and sports and everywhere. I think it's just amazing. And I just want to confirm what you're saying, that the rich, diverse people that you interact with, that's amazing, and that's such a fantastic engine for growth. Yeah.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah. No, so like now, a young person might be saying, look at Karen. She is doing a fantastic job. We see her sometimes on TV. She's meeting famous people. She's having critical conversations. I want to be like her. I want to do what she does. What would your advice be to that person?
I think I'd say that, you should be open to opportunities. The things that I've had, or the opportunities I've had in my life haven't just been, being thrown at me, but me taking on the work to say, okay, can I do this? And am I going to put in my best foot forward? So since my varsity years, I was very, very strong in academics, and I always strive to, try to get the best marks that I can do for myself. So I also kind of put that approach into my work, that, whatever it is that I take on, a task, a challenge, let it be that I'm putting my best foot forward. That's something I always say to my students, that guys, don't give me mediocre work. I want to see you give it your all and your best, to feel that, I did this and my best was enough, and you grow from that. So that also then led me to, getting the opportunities that I have. My first job was with ENCA, which, as a young journalist, never did I ever think I would get to work for such a reputable organization. And it was all because I'd worked hard. And I remember the managing editor at that time was quite impressed, because I came from MGI, which is a private institution. So it's not very big. It's not very well known in South Africa compared to your vets and so forth. And, he was already impressed by the caliber of work, just because he's never heard of anyone coming from that place. So it also shows that when you're working hard, you're not just doing it for yourself, but you're representing the people that have believed in you, the people that, have put their heart and soul into, making you succeed or seeing you succeed, your parents that have put in the work for you to be able to get an education, your friends and so forth. So, you're not just doing this for yourself, but you're doing this for everyone around you. And it's important that you give yourself that pat on the back to say, I'm going to do the best that I can in whatever I do, no matter what job it is, even if it's not paying, even if it's something that, you're doing for a passion. Let it be that you're doing it with your all. And all the opportunities will come, because people will remember, oh, I remember Nika, I worked with him before, and he did such a great job on this project. I want to work with him again. Let people remember you for that. Lucky Dube always says, be good to the people on your way up the ladder, because you'll meet them on your way down. And honestly, you'll never know when you're going to meet someone again, or when you're going to need them again. Like our conversation now, we met 2008, 2018. 18. And it's just for that, yes. It was just that short hour. But I'm thankful that you actually remembered me even from then, and were able to, get to this point of doing the podcast. So from working hard, making sure that you're putting your best foot forward, and also just making sure that you leave a good impression wherever it is that you go, is so important.
And curating the Forbes 30 under 30, how's that? That must have been quite an experience.
Oh gosh, it was. It's a crazy experience. it's literally like doing your PhD in like a few months.
Whoa.
So it's a lot of research. It is honestly a lot of research. So I started on the project last year, 2000. Yeah, the first project I was part of was the 2019 version, and there we went from profiling 30 people to 120 people. And at the time, the former curator had left the company, so I had the opportunity to now take it on all by myself. So researching the whole continent for 120 people. So cutting that list down is always hectic. Yeah. And I mean, you're dealing with so many different things, from people trying to bribe you, from people, trying to get onto the list, and you're like, guys, it just doesn't work like that. There's checks and balances that have to go into it. And I really try hard to do my work and give it my all, because I know that this list is not just about me, but it's about all the young people in Africa, all the other people that have once said, I want to be in that Forbes list. So it's such a huge responsibility that I'm thankful for, but it also can be quite, stressful, especially during that period of researching, of fact checking, making sure. Sometimes you're even wondering, did I put the right person on?
No.
Those are things that you think about, and you have to be very cautious. You have to be you have to be also a very good judge of character, because these are people that are also kind of representing the brand, and you're giving them that credibility to say that Forbes is backing them up.
Wow.
So it's so important that I have to get out of it and think about it as a bigger picture than just me as an individual.
No, fantastic. Fantastic. To finish this thing off, we're going to go through a lightning round of questions. And now what I always tell my guests is that the first answer that comes to your head, if you take more than 10 seconds to think about it.
Oh, gosh.
Right answer.
I hope you don't judge me for some of these answers.
No. Judge-free zone. This is a judgment-free zone.
Okay.
So, most famous person that you have ever interviewed or profiled?
Naomi Campbell. That was a surreal experience. I will never forget it. I'm sorry. That's why I said it like so lit up, because it was a great experience for me.
Favorite holiday destination?
Mauritius. Yeah.
Oh, wow. In fact, can I tell you something interesting? You're the first person in a while that has not said Zanzibar. So
really, okay.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Okay,
a lot of people want to go to Zanzibar.
Word. Hey, you should see. Okay. The three fundamental things that would make up a perfect date, romantic date. 3 things.
Good communication.
Yeah.
Chemistry, and good food.
Good food.
Of course, I love food, so that has to be good too.
Last question: what is your favorite music?
I love a little bit of everything. I love everything. I mean, I play guitar, so music is my passion. Yeah. I have my hip hop days, my pop days, African music, indie. Yeah.
Gee whiz, eh? It's a variety.
Quite a lot. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Karen. We really appreciate your time. Like I said, you're very, very impressive, and I really do mean that. I've learned a lot about you just following you from social media, following you from a distance. I'm actually inspired. One of the reasons why I was inspired to start the Economites with my business partner was actually seeing you move around. And I was like, okay, no, listen, you can do this, then let me also try to also do something else. So in that regard, I appreciate that.
No, thank you so much for having me on this, and also just for your, very positive words. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing more content from you guys. I think it's quite impressive that you're actually running this whole production from your different spaces at home. So that's really useful. Connecting people like that is beautiful. So all the best with everything. I look forward to seeing more.
How do people reach you? Socials?
So you can catch me on ITS_Karen M on Instagram, Twitter, and that's Keeping Up with Karen. So I'm gonna see you guys. And Facebook, I'm there as well as Karen Mwendera.
No, fantastic. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Nico. Same to you. Bye.
Well, there you have it. This has been another candid conversations on a variety of critical issues. Now it's worth mentioning that I was not talking to a stranger when I was speaking to Karen today. In fact, I met her 2 years ago at ENCA when she was a producer of Backchat. Since then, her career evolved and her experiences that she gained inspired us to reach out to her and to make this episode happen. I do hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and thank you so much for tuning in. Bye.